Hello everyone, this is Professor Robert Solis and welcome to this video lesson. Again, we're going to be talking about subs and functions, more specifically the functions part of procedures. So let me switch back over here to Visual Studio, and I have created this very simple application. In essence, it's going to add two numbers. Now, I really shouldn't have said subs and functions because really what this thing does is it's going to explain only the functions portion. That was another video lesson where we talked about subs. So let me go ahead and change this in the text property for the form. I'll go over here and I'll change this to just functions. So let me hit delete a couple times. There we go. We're really just talking about functions. So if I double click over here on the submit button, you'll see the code that I've already established. Now I want to show you two versions of the function, but before I do that, let me just make sure that I illustrate what a function is. So in this case, I'm going to switch back over here to my drawing application, and I want to show you what a function is. So let's say that you have a frisbee, and you are going to throw that frisbee to me. Okay, so I write the number 10 on this frisbee. You throw the frisbee to me, and I take that number 10 and I cross it out and I double it. Okay, so now it's 20, and now I throw the frisbee back to you. Okay, what is this called? We call this a function. Well, first of all, notice what I did. I took your number that you gave to me and I doubled it. So what is a function? It's a collection of code that does some purpose. It does some function. In this case, it looks like the purpose of my function is to double the number that you give to me. Now, here's another important part of a function. A function returns back to you some sort of a result. So subs are different. Subs are like this. Subs are, say, for example, if I take this and if I send you some data, and again, I can double the number. Say, for example, I could take the 10 that I sent to you, right? And then you double it. But notice what subs do not do. Subs do not return anything. So this is an example of a sub. A sub is still a collection of code, just like a function is a collection or a chunk of code. Subs do not return anything. Functions, on the other hand, they return something, as you can see over here. Okay, so let me clear this. Select all, delete. All right, now another thing to remind you about is the parameters that are inside of a function. Okay, so here's our analogy again of a frisbee, and let's say that I have the number 10, and I'm going to throw the frisbee to you. Now, how I throw the frisbee to you is important, right? Because one of the things that I could do is I could pass by reference. So I'll just say pass by ref. Pass by reference means I am taking the original data, I am giving it to you. You're going to manipulate it. Now let's say that your job in this function is to take the data and double it. Okay, so now we've changed this data that I've given to you to 20, and you're going to send back the frisbee to me because we're still talking about the concept of functions. Okay, here we go. We're talking about functions. All right, now how I give you data, well, there's two different ways that I can give you data. It's important to distinguish between the two. When I pass by reference, I am giving you the original. When you change the original, that's it. We don't know what the original is. We've lost the value. So now you've changed 10 into 20 because you're double it, and then you send that 20 back to me. All right, now another way is to take that original frisbee or original data and let's clone it. Okay, so now I'm going to do this. So I send the data to you. When I'm taking that data and copying and pasting it or cloning it, then we call that pass by value. So we're going to pass by value. Again, here's the frisbee, this one over here that you've thrown, or that maybe I threw to you. And let's say, for example, that we are going to double the data. So we'll take this, we'll turn that to a 20. And again, we are going to return this data back. Now, the thing is, I still know that my original data is 10. Even though I gave you a copy, well, I shouldn't say even though, because I created a copy of the original data, it doesn't matter if you manipulate it because I have the original. So pass by value, pass by reference. The difference is, how am I sending the data to you? Am I sending you the original value or am I sending you a copy? Right? Let's say, for example, my son's in baseball and they all the time ask for a birth certificate check. All right? So am I going to show the opposing coach my son's original birth certificate, or am I going to show him a copy of it? Hey, I'm going to show him a copy of it because I don't want the original to get all messed up, right? So that's the difference between pass by reference and pass by value. If you're passing the data originally, you are passing by value or by reference. If you are making a copy of the data and then passing that copy, we call that pass by value. All right, so now let me switch back over here to my Visual Studio program. And over here, I have two examples of a function. So what happens is when I click on this button, when I double click on the button, that's going to take me to the code area, as you can see over here. So as I scroll down, let me scroll down over here a little bit. As I scroll down, you'll notice two functions. One is add two numbers function, and it has some data. And then over here, it has add two numbers version B. So I'm trying to create two versions of this. And as you can see over here, there is no data that I'm passing to this function. Notice that a function returns something. If this were the word sub, then you wouldn't have return. But because this is a function, what does that mean? Well, first of all, the name of this function is add two numbers function. It looks like I am passing by values. That means I'm copying and pasting the data. It looks like I'm passing two integers in terms of arguments or the predicate. I'm sending two items, two integers to this function. And then finally, you'll notice this, it says as. Now it's wrapped around to the second line, but if I had enough room on my screen, it would continue on to the first line. It looks like I am returning an integer. So after the parens, when you see the word as, and that's only going to happen for functions, this indicates what you are returning. And in this case, I'm going to be returning a whole number. So in other words, let me reword it like this. All right, you give me two whole numbers, I'm going to process them, and then I'm going to return to you one whole number. By the way, that's all that functions can return in Visual Basic. Functions can only return one item, but they can receive multiple items. If I just sent this item over here, that'd be okay. If I'm going to send multiple items, notice that they are separated by commas. Can I send 3 arguments, 4 arguments, 5? Yeah, it's up to you how many you want to send. All right, now what I like to do, this is kind of like a personal preference thing. Sometimes I like to do this where I put the word par after the variable. So that stands for parameter. So this is the num1 parameter. This is the num2 parameter. And I like to do that with introductory students because it teaches them that from the main program, if I had num1 and num2, like I do over here, say for example, num1 and num2, well that's going to be different than num1 over here and num2 over here. We talked about that in the previous video. But just to make it more readable, I'll go ahead and put num1 par, num2 par, so that an introductory student would see clearly this is not the same thing as num1. I mean, it's not the same thing if I said num1 anyway, but by saying num1 par, it just makes it obvious this is not the same thing as num1. These two are not different. Well, primarily they're not different because they have a different scope, right? This belongs to this click event. It's like this is a student inside of this classroom and his name is num1. This is a student who's inside of this classroom and his name is num1, but to make it a little bit different, I'll say his name is num1 par. Okay, so that's what the whole PAR represents. It's just me adding a couple of extra letters to indicate a difference between the variables. All right, it looks like in this version of the function, I am declaring a variable, sum, as a whole number. I'm going to add the two numbers that you gave to me. See, here's num1 parameter, so pretend there's an arrow over here, and pretend there's an arrow extending from here over here. Right? These are the two values that were sent. All right, so I'm going to take those two, add them together. When I get the result, by adding them together, I am going to return that sum. So for a function, it's a collection of code. Here it is. Now that collection of code must return something because the word function is here. What is it going to return? It looks like it's going to return a whole number. So that's exactly what I do. Notice that sum is a whole number, an integer specifically, and so it's going to return the addition of those two numbers that were sent. Okay, so that's version 1 of this function to add two numbers. Now version 2, let me scroll down a little bit more, is you can see over here, version 2, this is a function. It's going to return a whole number. The name of the function is add two numbers version B. Notice that within the parentheses, I have no arguments. So that's this flavor of this particular function. It's going to do the same thing, add two numbers, but it's not going to be given any argument or any data to manipulate. So if you're not giving me anything and you expect for me to add two numbers, I have to obtain those two numbers. So notice what I do. The first thing I do is I declare num1 par, num2 par, and then result. Now num1 and num2 par, what those are the values that were entered into the text box. So the user is going to enter values here in this text box and values here in this text box. Let me obtain the text from that text box, convert it into a whole number, specifically a 32-bit integer, and then I'll place it or assign it into num1 par, because that's what this is. It's an integer, so I have to convert, because this is a string. All right, I'll do the same thing for num2 par. I'll obtain the data from the text box, convert it to an integer, and assign it into num2 par. Once I've done that, I can obtain the sum of those two. So result, which is a whole number or an integer, is going to be the addition of num1 plus num2 par. So we place the result into here, or we assign it into result. So this is read from right to left. Take this plus this and assign it into here. That's how you would read it in English. All right, so what am I going to do? Since this is a function, I'm expected to return something. In this case, it looks like I'm going to be returning a whole number. So that's exactly what I do. I return result, which is a whole number. Okay, so this is one chunk of code over here. Let me select it properly here. This is one chunk of code over here. It's a function that returns something. Well, it has to return something because it's a function. And here's another example of a function that returns something. But over here, it has arguments, whereas this one over here did not. So let's test out both versions to see how this works out. And I'm going to stop the code so we can investigate what this looks like. Let me stop the code right here. So I have version 1 of the code. I'm going to stop it right here. Notice what I do. When I click the button, when I run the program and click this button, what we're going to do is we're going to obtain the data from the user down here. But first I declare num1, num2, and result. So I obtain the data. I put it into num1. I then call this function to perform this addition behavior. So let me run the program. Let me place a number 3 over here and a number 4 over here, and then submit. All right, so we've just placed the data into num1 and num2. As you can see over here, we have 3 and 4 in num1 and num2, because that's what's in the text box. We are now going to jump to this function. So let me go over here, and let's step into, or F11. So now we step into the function. The first parameter, num1, is 3, num1 par, and then num2 par, as you can see, is 4. So we are passing by value. We are passing a copy of the data to this function. All right, so now what we're going to do, let me go ahead and step over. We are about to execute this line of code, which is going to add 3 and 4. And we're going to place that into sum, which is currently assigned 0. By the way, Visual Basic, if you don't give an initial value when you declare a variable like this, this says dim sum as integer. So this is a declaration, but we didn't initialize it to anything. Visual Basic will take integers and assign them 0 if you didn't initialize them. For doubles, it'll be 0.0. For bools, it'll be false. For a string, it'll be null. So Visual Basic has this ability to initialize variables that were declared but not initialized. All right, now we're going to take these two numbers, put them into sum. So let me go ahead and step over. And so as you can see over here, sum is 7. I have the same thing over here in this autos panel. Sum is 7. And now I'm about to return that value. So let me do this. Let me step out of this, and it goes back over here. Now what are we going to do? We're going to take that value that was returned to us, as you can see over here, and we're going to assign it into result. All right, so if I were to step over, you can see here that result is 7. We're going to take that 7, convert it into a string, and place it into the label of our form. So let me go ahead and continue from here. And as you can see, this 3 plus 4 is 7. That 7 is now assigned into the text property of the label, and that's what this is, LBL result. All right, let me stop the program. Let me take off the break over here. So that was function 1, or the version of function 1. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment all this out. So let me move up over here, and I'm going to select all this code all the way from here, and I'm going to comment all of this out. And I'm going to select this button over here to comment all of the selected lines. And then down over here, I have version 2. Let me uncomment these. So over here, I'm going to uncomment. There we go. All right. It looks like I shouldn't have taken this away or here. All right, so result is still declared as an integer. It's a variable that's an integer. And what this thing is going to do is it's going to be calling this function over here, and then it's going to assign that into result. Now, actually, you know what? I don't think I need to do this because it looks like it displays. Does it display? No, it doesn't. This particular version obtains the data, it's going to obtain the result, and then it's going to send it back to me. All right, so it looks like it's going to send it back, and then over here I have this variable called result, and that's going to be placed into here. So why do I have that green squiggly line? Let me hover on top of that. And so it says here that result is not declared, and may be inaccessible due to its protection level. Okay, so first of all, let me go over here. It looks like result is declared. Let me just go over here to build, rebuild. It looks like everything was successful. Let me close this over here. Okay, so I just needed to rebuild it so that the compiler was updated. All right, let me do this. Let me stop the code right here, and I'm going to run the program. Again, I'll place 4 over here and 3 over here. We'll put it in backwards. All right, let me click submit. So notice over here we are stopping the program right here just before we call add two numbers version B. So we're going to call this function. I am not giving it any data. So let's go ahead and step into this. All right, now this doesn't receive any arguments, so I need to obtain the data from the user. So when I click skip over, notice over here that I'm going to obtain num1 par and num2 par, namely the values that were entered into the text box. All right, I'm about to add those two numbers and to place them into result. So when I step over, notice that result is 7, or if I just hover over here, result is 7. Now we're going to return whatever that value is, which in this case is 7. So I can step over, or I can just step out. I think I'll just step out. And now this thing that was called, this function that was called is 7. That's going to be assigned to result. So if I step over one more time, notice that result is 7. Let's take that 7, convert it to a string, place it into the text property of this label. So if I click continue, there it is, 4 plus 3, that's 7. All right, so that's an example of calling a function without parameters, and the above is an example of calling functions with parameters, as you can see over here. And that is it. So this is Professor Robert Solis. I hope this video lesson was helpful. Have a good day. We'll see you next time.